So, I mean, how do you approach change, Tiff? I mean, I know you're going through change right now, but just in general.
Um, Generally speaking, I like to believe, and I'm going to use that. I like to believe that I'm a little bit go with the flow. Once the initial panic um settles, and I say the initial panic because whether it's a change I want or don't want, there's always that initial like, what's wrong with what I'm doing right now? Do I have to? um, and then I find a solution fairly quickly. So I always like I know myself that I need to process the initial reaction is usually not a logical one. I know who I am pretty well. I've got a lot of self-awareness, so I've got to get my drama out for a minute, and then I can find solutions. So um, I've become even like more aware of like there's changes that are going to happen whether I like it or not. And then there's changes where maybe there's some room for adjustment. So if I have an opportunity to be part of like thinking about the change, I usually can again be very solution focused, but I always have to like why are we doing it? What's the value of this? Oh my God, everything's going to be different. I have to process all of that, like freak out for a minute, and then I get over it really, and then I can go with the flow. I actually do enjoy change, believe it or not. This is one of the reasons, like this lifestyle that we live is appealing for me. A lot of people always ask, like, how do Tip? How do you stay on the road? All how do you like? You're always on the go. You're always, people don't ask me how I'm doing. They're always asking me where I'm at. So that's like the
Yeah.
common thing. But that type of like fast paced, constant, it suits me. I really enjoy that part of it. Um, but when things are again, a lot of times when they're out of my control, I have to freak out first, just
Yeah.
momentarily. I have a momentary freak out, and then once my brain settles, I can move on very quickly and be like, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? What I don't like to have like a 47-point plan. I do not I'm not a fan of we're going to do this and then this and then this. I kind of like things to happen more organically and like kind of be in the moment. Like, okay, this is the next step. Great. Now the next step is okay, great. Now the next step is if it looks too complex, it's overwhelming for me. So I kind of like one step at a time. That's like my
Mhm.
calendar. I live one week at a time. Where am I going to be next week? Cool. Where am I the week after that? Cool. Um, but like trying to plan things out for like and thinking about it all at once, absolutely not. So I like that's why the Zorro circle thing works well for me. Like, what's the goal? Let's one step at a time. Next step, happy. So that's how I approach change. I like to think about the whole thing, but I like to take it one step at a time.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. And I mean, just kind of you know, living life, one quarter mile at a time, right? Like a Fast and the Furious style, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but just knowing that when you're going down that quarter mile or that week, that you would hope to know what to expect, right? I'm kind of like you, where I like the novelty of being in different places, right? It's and if I'm in a different place for 2 or 3 days at a time, that's cool. It's
Mm-hmm.
if I was there for too long, it would start to wear me out, right? So but just going, like going to Bakersfield and then next month coming back to Bakersfield and going to Fresno and then next month going to Tulare and Fresno and then Bakersfield, right? That's fine. I mean, that's like I said, it's one day. I have my routines there. I know what to expect. I know what I'm looking for. I know the people that I'm working with, right? And so it's something that, is appealing to me as well. It's just, when it's too monotonous, which is why
Mm-hmm.
I like about what we do. It's not monotonous, right? It's not
Right.
administrative, right? I mean, they've added some administrative tasks to some of the jobs that we do now, which I think is one of the one of the challenges that people are having. You know, I do this so I'm not in an office, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not having to fill this out and things like that. But it's you know, how do we help people get to that feeling of comfort? Like I mentioned, change, even good change, it's still, like you said, I'm going from one place to another. And so I might have a freak out at first. How do we allow people to have that freak out and at the same time feel like they're in the right place, right? Because that first, if you're having a freak out and you get to the place and the place, I'll tell you what gets me is if I go to a place and I pull up right when I'm supposed to and nothing's ready, no tables are out, or we told them we wanted the tables in a specific way and they're not, and there's no one to talk to, and things are just kind of left there, and you don't really know where the Wi-Fi is or the connection to the projector, right? And it's like, you know, I have my routine I like to be able to work with so that when I get there, I can just get started and I'm feeling like I'm in the flow from the first moment we start, doing the training. But when something is supposed to happen and it doesn't happen, that can kind of throw me off a little bit, right? And I'm not necessarily
Mhm.
at my best self, right? So that's something that,
Right.
I and there's some places where I know that's going to happen, right? So I walk in expecting to, okay, so I know here I'm supposed to do all this. There's some places where they have everything laid out for you and everything's ready to go and they've opened the box and they put all the stuff out. And there's other places where you have to find the box, right? You have to, like in
Hmm.
Ventura County, I know when I get there, the box is
Yeah.
already be there, and I already know how to, connect my laptop to their system and how to move over, and it's a little screen that's different than all the other places, but I've learned to do it. And so people, oh, you need anything? No, I got it. We're good, right? But there's other places, if you walk in and something usually happens if it's a new coordinator, or if it's somebody who's not familiar with it, it's just like, okay, so I need to, you know, woosah a little bit before I get into my thing. So, even us who are professional roll with the punchers, right? It's always nice to have a little bit of that understanding of what's coming, right? And then
Yeah.
that's like I mentioned, just with folks who are coming into a new workspace, a new job, or whatever else it is, to make sure that hey, look, anything that you're going to go through is going to be your mental space and your emotions, right? But
Hmm.
in terms of you settling in here, we're going to do everything we can to help you get up to speed as quick as we can allow you to, and the rest is up to you, right? That just makes people feel better. Right? I mean, I think with 60% of people decide if they want to stay at their job for longer than a year after the first 3 months.
Hmm.
Right? It's really a powerful time.
I agree. I agree. I think it's like that point where that newness wears off, where the forming ends and then the storming begins. People will
Yeah.
know, like when we're storming, how do you deal with the storm? And if not well, that might be a good opportunity to start looking elsewhere. For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Especially before I get attached. Because I don't know, for me, that's the hardest part of leaving a job is leaving the people, right? Like I can do my job anywhere, but when I'm connected to the people, I don't know, the last job I left, I didn't feel bad about leaving the people. I couldn't wait to leave the people. That's why I was leaving the job. But, when you have relationships with people, it's sometimes hard to know you're not going to see them every day. So
Yeah.
that's tough. Definitely tough.
Yeah.
That's
And
the adjournment that morning.
I've been known to go back and visit old jobs for a while until, little by little, I was visiting them less and less. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, oh, I see
Yeah.
them on Facebook, right? But
Yeah.
I try to make
Yeah.
sure that there's that adjustment and that I allow myself to adjust and, but not to the point where I miss it so much. I had a coworker who she came to work where I worked, and within a month she left and went back to her old job. And that after the weekend, she came back and came in the office and begged the HR manager for her job back. And I'd never seen it before. I'd never seen someone leave and then actually want to come back, right? So she thought maybe the grass was greener, and but then we talked to her about it. And she said, I didn't feel like I was doing well here. This was a better job with better pay, but there was three times the people. I had more responsibility, and I wasn't really being trained. The only training I was getting from my leader was, oh, well, you've done this before, so you know what you're doing. right? And then if I had a question, oh, you didn't know this, right? So it felt total judgment, right? And
Right.
so she
Right.
said, I felt like I was struggling, like I was, not even treading water. I was just drowning. And so, the other job was still open. So I went back, and then over the weekend, I thought, there's a reason why I left this job. There's a reason why, I wanted more. As much as I love my old job, I wanted more. I wanted a challenge. And so she went back in and she talked to the HR manager. HR manager called me in and was saying, can we set her up with an onboarding program? And actually, after that, we really started creating a structured onboarding program for folks where it wasn't, and the structure wasn't that you talk to everybody, the same people all the time. The structure was you have a job. What are your job functions? What are your job roles? Who are the people you're going to talk to? Who are the people in business lines you're going to connect with? Who are people in your office you're going to connect with? Right. So, how do we set up those meetings with them so that you get acquainted much faster and feel like you're more at home? It kind of happened to me on accident at that job. When I first started, I got taken out to lunch. We went to Cheesecake Factory, and we came back. And then that night, I connected with one of the business partners I was going to start a project with, and he invited me to dinner. We went to the Cheesecake Factory, on Cheesecake Factory twice on my first day. So I knew I was in the right place. But but it was one of those things where I got connected with him, and it started off with, okay, I feel like, people are recognizing my purpose and why I'm here, even if they're not pushing me to have to do things, right off the bat. They help me feel, if not welcome, definitely like I was in the right place to be a part of something. So, just making sure that you plan for that. Making people need to know. They need to know why the change is happening, right?
Mhm.
And they need to know that they're, difficult as it's going to be, they're going to be supported through the change, right? And that's definitely such an important piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Because if you're not part of the change, it's happening to you, not with you.
They're
Chances
gonna
are
make
you're
change.
gonna, yeah, or you're gonna reject it. You're gonna find out every reason why you can't or why you shouldn't have to.
Yeah. And
Why
and
you
there's so
can't
many,
and why,
what's
yeah.
that?
And so why you can't, why you shouldn't have to.
Yeah. And that's an important piece, to know why we have to do those things. Like, we've talked about the Noster model a few times, right? Where, one of the things, if you don't understand the motivation, the why to change, then you're not going to be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
Or you're not
Yeah.
going to get as much buy-in. People are just going to do it just because you said so, and that doesn't work for adults, right? And so
Right.
there's so many different models out there that, you know, uh, find a burning platform, right? Create a sense of urgency, right? And that when they talk about with Cotter and all these different these different things, but just a model that you're familiar with, that ADKAR model, right? That talks about, we have to help people be aware that a change is actually needed, right? We have to do it,
Hmm.
right? And then there's a reason for it, right? So the awareness is the A, then the desire is the D, right? Which is, I'm actually, I know why I need to get it done and how is it going to benefit me or my job or, whatever else it is that we're doing. And then, to have the knowledge, right? To be able to be aware of the change and what it's going to look like, right? And maybe you have to learn specific skills or software or whatever it is that you have to do to be able to stay on top of that change, and then and get trained, and then you have
Yeah.
to take action. It has to be done, right? That's a challenge when people want to start something, they just want to think about it for a while. After a while, you lose steam, right? When we talk about goal setting, you want to start a goal setting project within a month, right? I mean, it says sometimes in literature says 3 months, but within a month, if you don't start within a month, you lose the motivation and the steam and the impetus to get it done, right? At least if you're going to start school in the fall, at least you're registered and you have all your ducks in a row and everything else like that, and you're waiting for that time to come out, so you're preparing for it, right? But just be able to be properly skilled and then take that action. You have to take an action. You have to create action plans. One of the hardest things with taking action is when we're just taking it willy-nilly. We're just jumping out and, as I said, one of, my worst, my least favorite, terms is flying the plane while we're building it. I'd rather not fly the plane while we're building it. I'd like to really know, what the plane is airworthy, right? And
Right.
so you don't want to have to go back to the drawing board. That's talk about deflating, right? Talk about demotivating is when a change has not been well thought out. And so that can really cause changes to fail all the time. And then that reinforcement, right? So we've done it, we've made the change, and how do we reinforce that change into our new normal, right? How do we incorporate it as a regular practice? How is it sustainable in our culture, in our unit, on our team, right? And that's where we still are practicing. How do we evaluate the change? And maybe the change was good, but maybe we underestimated and actually can do more. So how do we tweak it to create more? Or how did maybe we had too high of a bar and we reached a certain point and, you know, can we reach that higher point, or is this actually the good place? And how do we make sure that that's something that, like I said, we can replicate, because just doing something to improve and then resting on your laurels, that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, so I got some thoughts here.
Yeah.
Um, so first, the we'll start at the beginning, the A part of this awareness. I think one of the biggest opportunities for growth that a lot of organizations have is like just letting people what's happening and what's coming. I'm a huge fan. This is how you know I'm from an agricultural community because we have to communicate with drip irrigation and not a flash flood. So what happens a lot of times, and especially in government, is that we know changes are coming, but we don't know the details yet. So instead of like starting to communicate about like big picture stuff. Here's what's coming. Here's what you can anticipate. Here's what we're going to focus on. Here's why we're doing it. A lot of times, like, hush, hush, hush. Let's not say anything until we know everything. And then all of a sudden, it's like, sit in this 1 day training, and we're going to just data dump everything that we know about this topic.
Yeah.
And people are overwhelmed. Again, the panic sets in. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so different. Have they thought about this? Have they thought about this? How come nobody talked to us? How come we're just now hearing about it? This is happening in 2 weeks. Oh my God, how do we prepare? So that's not incredibly effective. Um, and so I really love this idea of in the awareness. We can't tell everybody everything because some stuff won't come to fruition. But when we do have some information, can we start to communicate? We've got some changes coming up. Here's what we know now. Here's what's still up in the air. Here's what we haven't decided yet. What do you think? I think that's a big piece of awareness. Um, with the desire, this really comes down to are we, again, thinking about what the vision is, why this change is happening? Um, how are we doing it in the sense of like what problem are we trying to solve? I'm not a fan of the because I said so, because they said so, because management said so. I don't find that incredibly inspiring for most people. I want to know like what's the vision, like what's the outcome that we're hoping for, and also what benefit is this? Benefit to me, benefit to us, benefit to the client, benefit to somebody. Because if we're just changing for the sake of changing without any real value behind it, I'm already going to tell you all the reasons we shouldn't. When
Mhm.
it comes to knowledge, this for me is really just about, again, skill building, letting people know what to do, how they're going to do it. Let's practice. This is what it looks like. Again, here's what we know right now. Here's what we're figuring out. What do you think we could do to solve this problem? I think people have to be active participants in that whole entire process. And then, of course, when we don't want to build the plane while it's in the air, but we also need to know we've got to probably do some repairs while we're in the air
Yeah.
because we don't know what we don't know until we know. And so, as we're kind of going through change, again, keeping our eye on the prize, keeping, again, what's the vision, what's the goal, and putting people in a position to be able to problem solve without having all of the answers. Like there has to be a little bit of flexibility in this, not a little bit of, a lot of bit of flexibility in this process to say, here's what you need to come to us for leadership, and here's what you can handle on your own. So there's going to be some moments where you're going to have to figure it out in the moment without having certainty. And we're giving you kind of some creative license to figure that stuff out in real time, as long as it's in line with our goal. So figure that out and then report back and let us know how it's working, right? So this is what happened. This is what I did. This is how it worked. Or this is what I tried. This is what didn't work. This is what I'm going to do next time. Like really putting people in that position to have some autonomy over those in the moment when we don't have certainty, when there's not a process, or again, it's unknown. And then I do love the reinforcements as well. Um, there's a lot of times where we plan and our plan is airtight until reality hits and the plan doesn't match reality.
No.
There's got to be some adaptation. And I love this quote. You know, I've shared it here before. You got to stay flexible. If you stay flexible, you never get bent out of shape. But even like the best laid out plan sometimes doesn't work the way that we thought it would, and we have to have an ability to come back and say, this isn't working. What can we do differently? Where I think we fail a lot in organizations is like way too much energy is put into why we can't, why we shouldn't have to, how this is never going to work. And instead focusing energy on how could we make this work? What do we need to do? How can we make this successful? And so if the dialogues and the conversations and the trainings and the team meetings are not focused on how can we, like I have to hear your complaints. I have to hear your concerns. I don't want to just brush it away, be like, oh, that's not going to happen. I can say, okay, that's a genuine concern. What's our plan to overcome that challenge if it happens? Right? So
Mhm.
you're the expert, you're the person on the ground, you're the person that's doing the work. So if you can anticipate that this is going to happen, what can we do to get around it versus, oh yeah, no, that probably won't happen. Well, what if it does? Right? Because there are people who need that solid plan. I need to know the what ifs. And so I have to be able to put them in a position to be thinking about solutions instead of just kind of wallowing in the unknown.
Yeah.
So that's when I think about ADKAR. Those are the things like I'm thinking about is really how do we communicate and sometimes over communicate, but even more so, how do we put people in the driver's seat to be able to navigate through this when we may have a roadmap, but we don't know what roads are going to be closed. We don't know where the potholes and detours are going to be. We don't know, where there might be something else going on. I want to put people in a position where they can navigate through that with their own expertise and then congratulate them for being problem solvers
Yeah.
versus you didn't follow the plan exactly as we described it, even though we didn't know what would happen.
Yeah. Well, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's absolutely right. And that's the issue. And another thing, I mean, if we have a roadmap and then there is a barrier, what is going and it might the workaround might take a while. I don't know if like we're going to I'm going to Inyo, right? And so what if the pass going through Yosemite is snowed in, right? And that was my
Hmm.
plan to go. You know,
Yep.
what do I do? Right? I got to get home, so I'm gonna suck it up and take that extra 3, 4 hours around the mountains. But what if people say, "Well, why do I need to go around the mountains? Why? That's fine. It's closed. I'm just gonna give up." Right? And so really helping people to understand this is why we're making this change because change is frustrating and people, even the best laid plans, are going to fail, like you said, and even the best laid plans might be difficult for some people to follow, right?
Hmm.
And there's a stat, I think I mentioned it before, but 2/3 of all change plans in the US fail every year. And
Hmm.
95% of those failed change plans had good plans,
Right.
right? They had sound plans that, we're going to launch it, we're going to do this. I mean, maybe there were some things missing, which was one of the reasons why they failed, but they had structured plans. So planning is great. And I love planning, love goal setting, love having those things. But if you don't know why you're following that plan, and how it's going to benefit you, how it's going to make your job easier, how it's going to bring profit, how it's going to make our organization sustainable. or bring benefit to the end user, if that's what you care about, then
Hmm.
when it going gets tough, you're going to say, screw it. Why do I have to do it? I'd rather not. Right. And so, that awareness is not just, hey, we need to do this because of this. This is, we need to do this and let's talk about it. What are you seeing? Right. What are your concerns? And like you said, having those conversations up front, not even just when we're having the plan. I mean, that's important. So what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What's working? What's not working? What can we do to tweak it? But right up front, this is what we want to do. This is what we see is going to be the goal. This is what success will look like. We're working on how we're going to make this happen. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns?
Hmm.
Right. And to allow people to vent, even if what they're saying in terms of venting is just emotional venting, like, oh gosh, we're doing another change. Because that's what a lot of it is. Oh, we have to change again, as opposed to, well, I have concerns about how we're going to get this done. Those two are definitely valid, but a lot of them are not necessarily process driven. A lot of them are emotional driven, right? So entertaining both and validating both, right? And
Hmm.
really being aware of that need to let people know this is what's happening. This is why we need to do it. And this is how it's going to benefit us, right? So that primes the pump, right? To where, and if people are allowed right off the bat to have a say so, there's not going to be so much. I've seen it in both ways, right? When I ran the teen center at Edwards Air Force Base, we moved from a 1,200 square foot building to a 6,000 square foot building. We were going to put in all these things that we had from the club. Oh, the club's going to give us pool tables and ping pong tables. And I said, okay, well, we're working with kids here. Let's see what they want. And they
Hmm.
wanted a ping pong table, they wanted a pool table, and they wanted couches to hang out and chill, a TV for video games, a TV to watch Total Request Live. That's how long ago it was, right? TRL. And then, they wanted a DJ booth and a Dance Dance Revolution video game. So we put all that stuff in there. And all the stuff that the club was going to give us, we hardly used it. And well, they're giving us all this stuff. You should be appreciative. I am appreciative. I'm appreciative that we got a workable, pool table and a ping pong table. That's great. But if it's not going to be used and it's just going to take up space, what are we going to do with these kids, right? And so we let the kids plan it. We let them tell us what they wanted and what they wanted it to look like. And we even when we were ordering couches, we ordered couches through the catalog, and I had the leadership group at the teen center pick out the couches that they wanted, right? And so now that they've done that, now they're fully aware of what the change is going to be, how it's going to benefit them, how they contributed to the change, and now they're going to be more bought in, right? They're going to have ownership
Hmm.
and investment, right? They can't say, oh, well, teen center, it's not what we wanted, because it's what you wanted. Is
Yeah.
a large
Yeah.
portion of it is exactly what you wanted. So, you wanted it, here it is. If you build it, they will come. Okay, well, let's see if you live up to that, right? So that's such an important piece up front, right? Um, Making sure people know what's happening, why it's happening, and how it's going to benefit you, and how can you get involved. And then, on the knowledge of the specific things, that go into that change, and how, like you said, how to be trained on processes, how to be trained on systems. I know of a new system that rolled out, last year, where it was, or 2 years ago, where the vendor created the entire platform and then gave it to the end user and said, do you have any questions on it? A month before it was
Hmm.
supposed to be rolled out. And people, the end users were like, well, why didn't you talk to us at the beginning? We could have told you that this isn't going to work, or that we need this connecting with this and that, and so that's definitely a challenge as well. I mean, we have subject matter experts in systems and processes, but if you're not engaging the people who are actually going to use it until, you give them a fully formed, you know, um, you know, thing and say, here it is, go forth and prosper. Well, I have questions, and that's that's not necessarily going to work for us. And how do you make that work? You really have to get the buy-in of the people who are going to be fully participating in the change. You can't just come from above, right? And if it comes from above, you have to let down ladders and ropes and a freaking helicopter, right? And bring people up to be able to have those conversations with you about what it's going to look like, right? And I've seen it
Hmm.
happen like that with those system changes. It's with the teen center I did, but also we had a major change at the bank that I worked at, where we had, we closed 20 branches, and that was a sixth of our footprint, right? And people were scared; they didn't know what to expect. There was going to be layoffs, and people were going to be transferring or retiring, and so leadership, they went out to all the different areas, from Reading down to Calexico, and they had town halls where two of them got in rental cars and drove down to those areas and let people talk to them for 3 hours, venting, being frustrated, asking questions. What is it going to look like? Is this going to be the end? And they stayed there and answered every question, and it was thorough, and people appreciated it. At the end of the day, people just want to know that you are thinking about them when you're making this change. It's not just change just for the sake of change, right? They want to know that the change is considering them as human beings, and that they have a right to be able to voice their opinion, if nothing else, right? And that you're not, if not welcoming the opinion, that it's valid to you and you appreciate the fact that they do have that right. And so it's so important, this front loading. I mean, because you see the connections up on the top, then that's the traditional change cycle, that people use for AA and NA, and a lot of the work we do in human services, that pre-contemplation is, I don't see that a change is needed. Why are we making this change? No one's told me that we needed to make a change. Why do you think I should change? Right?
Mhm.
Everything is everything to me, right? And then the contemplation is, okay, well, this sucks. This isn't exactly, you know, my my best time. I'm not living my best life. How do I make a difference? But gosh, there's so many things in front of me. There's so many roadblocks. How do I get to where it's my best life? I can't even see it. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not real, but I want to do it. And then the preparation is, okay, so I'm making the choice to do it. So now I'm becoming knowledgeable. I'm learning. I'm getting the skills, I'm getting the education, I'm getting the information that helps me to fill in the blanks and make this change real, right? Where I'm covering over the pencil with a pen, right? And so I know that this is something that I'm going to be actually doing. And then the action is, we're out there in the neutral zone, as you mentioned, right? And the neutral zone is the hardest part because it's scary. You're not used to it, or it's in places that have made you feel uncomfortable in the past. And helping people through those is so important. We talked about empowering people, helping people to have knowledge, to have a say, to know why they're doing that. But the action piece is, hey, you're struggling, you're not the only one struggling, but look how far you've come. You started here and now you're here, right? And so the next time we talk, you might be here, right? We're such a impatient society. We want to go from 0 to 100, you know, real quick, like Drake said, 0 to 100, right? And we don't always get to 100 in the same place. Some of us get through it a lot quicker, and some of us buy into things quicker. I know you like to talk about those early adopters. I'm a late adopter, right? When a new technology is out there or anything else, I want to see if it's going to work, make the bugs get all kinked out, and then, if it's been out in this for a while and it's still going, then I'll buy into it, right? And so, we have different people that take those things at different speeds. How do we help them feel like they're in the right place and they're growing and they're learning, and that they can come to us and talk to us as leaders? Hey, I'm struggling with this. This works, but this doesn't necessarily work for me. Why is it that we're doing it this way? Right? Those types of conversations, and also celebrate the quick wins. Hey, look, you already learned, the login and using the intake system, right? The rest of it's going to be a little difficult, but you can learn that as you go along the way. One of the things that is a challenge that I've seen, and I can't remember where we were talking about this, but that when you have a change and people they train you on. Maybe we were talking to Dr. Rob about this. They train you on the technical piece. They train
Mhm.
you on all the, this is all the stuff that you need. Yeah, what Rob was talking about, right? Onboarding doesn't have to be just an information dump, right? Onboarding should be hey, welcome to the luxury liner or to our to our resort where we want to make you feel comfortable, feel at home, feel like you're in the right place to be able to learn those things and support us, right? And so it's just a different mindset. If people are very technical, which is how a lot of people get hired, right? A lot of people get hired because they're very good at their technical skill. But, when you're that task focused, are you thinking about how are other people receiving this? How are people, who aren't necessarily task focused, who are relationship focused and want to know that I care about them, in terms of them being comfortable and that they're going to be doing well and surviving and not just surviving but thriving rather than get the work done.
Yeah. Well, that's the plumbing and the poetry. The plumbing and the poetry. You got to have a plan. You got to have the technical skills. But the poetry part is what's the human piece of it? Why are we doing it? Who does it help? Why should we care? Why should we put this energy? I'm all about, like, how do I say this with the love in my heart? Like, we all have opinions. I mean, we all do. And sometimes they're helpful and many times they're not. We're entitled to
Mhm.
them. Can I just say that
Yeah.
for the record? Like, everyone's entitled to have their opinion. But one of the things I think that we have to focus on in the workplace too is, like, is my opinion helpful? And when I'm like talking about is my opinion helpful, like, this is never going to work, that's not inherently helpful. It might feel true to you, but it doesn't really help anything. This is a terrible idea, that's an opinion, or this is going to be awesome, also an opinion. It doesn't always
Mhm.
have to be
Yeah.
negative.
Yeah.
It's just the way you feel about it. And again, I'm not saying that people are not allowed to have opinions. You should have opinions. You can. It's fine. Where I have to be thoughtful, even for myself, is this helpful to share? And if just sharing how I feel about it isn't going to change anything, then my next is, like, what feedback am I sharing? Right? Am I sharing feedback or information that can be helpful in the decision making process? Because let's just face it, we don't always have control over the outcome. We don't always have control over, like, what decisions are made. Sometimes we're part of the decision making process, and sometimes the decision's been made, and there's no opinion that you can share that's going to sway that. So when I'm trying to share my opinion, I'm trying to share information. And again, it's not just this is never going to work. I might say, I'm skeptical, and here's why I'm skeptical because of this. Or
Mhm.
this is this is what you're asking us to do and how you're asking us to do it. But here's where I have a genuine concern about it. Like, you're asking us to do this additional task, which I'm happy to do, but you're asking us to do it on our breaks and lunches, which is inherently illegal. Um, it, and that I have I'm going to challenge, but that's feedback. I'm not saying I'm not going to do it. This is never going to work. It's, here's information to assist you in your decision making process that maybe you're not thinking about because you're not, you're in you have a different perspective. You have a different vantage point. You might see we have this need, and this is how we're anticipating to meet this need. And this is what we want you to do to meet this need, but you're not necessarily doing what I do to know what my day to day looks like. And so it's not my opinion, my feedback, my perspective is incredibly valuable in making good decisions. And we don't always, as leaders, we don't always take that into consideration. And part of that, I think, is trying to shield from the initial freak out
Yeah.
about the change itself. Like, oh, we're going to change it. No, 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 no. And so they want to avoid that discomfort, but they, in that process of avoiding that really hard conversation, or maybe it doesn't even have to be hard, just in that having to take maybe the heat from this decision being made, you're missing out on an opportunity to get ahead of, like, I think what you were talking about earlier, to get ahead of some of those challenges. And so when I am even instructing about change management, get people involved as early as you possibly can to get as much feedback as you possibly can about, you might look on a map, by the way. leaders oftentimes can Google and be like, oh, to go from this place to this place, it's 2.5 hours. I have the map right here and it shows me the route. And I can see it very clearly on this spreadsheet, like the route. But if you're not on them main streets every day, Google doesn't
Yeah.
always give you the best directions, right?
Yeah.
You may like I can go that way, but what you don't know is that 90% of the time that road that it's asking us to go through is washed out. And what you don't know is that when we go through this area, there's no services for 75 miles. So if I have to go to the bathroom, I try not to go that way. Yeah, I know it's a straight shoot. It looks like a straight shoot on the map, but also I have no service on my cell phone for an hour and a half, which makes me feel very unsafe. And so I go the longer way for my well-being. And so like these are the things that unless you're in like doing the work, you may not know that stuff. And
Yeah.
so we don't want to just include, by the way, when we're like gathering that info, when we're looking for that feedback, don't just go to your high achievers or your high performers that are going to find it, like your early adopters. They can make it work no matter what. They can make it work no matter what because they're solution focused, solution focused. If this happens, I could do this. If this happens, I could do that because they love to innovate. Go to your haters. Go to the people who will be the most resistant, the ones who have a problem with everything. Get them involved early and often, and they will tell you all of the things that might go wrong so that you have protection in place for them. That's the people we need to go to. So I think a lot of times we fail when we're like, oh, we're including everybody. And I did including in air quotes for those of you who are not watching but listening. When we're including everybody, we tend to go with the confirmation bias. Who are the people who will agree with what we want to do and tell us that it's a great idea? Instead of let's find the people who real talk will tell you this is going to work, this isn't going to work, and here's why. Listen to them as well. They're a huge asset.